So truly, for almost 2 years, I've been trying to find someone. We've met a lot of people along the way. I found people on the West Coast. I found people all over that have talked about the militia. But my good friend Glenn Baker did a documentary and it's actually coming out really soon. Finish This Fight: The Story of a Pissed Off American Soldier. Some of y'all know Tom Stratton. He's in that. He was in that as well. The Lord just put us all together. Glenn told me that he met Dan and he interviewed him a couple weeks ago, I think, right? And he's like, yeah, we built a real constitutional militia. I'm like, what? I need his contact info. I've been waiting for this guy forever. So I called him, and right away, I just was going to Zoom him in. He's like, no, I'm driving down. He drove 6 hours to be here. He hasn't even slept yet. He just got up this morning and drove. He refuses to let me pay him anything. So I told him, oh, yeah, that's not how we roll down here. So we took him out to dinner, and we're going to pass these to give him an honorarium, okay? But Dan is, dude, you're a fascinating man. I've only met you a couple weeks ago, and we had the privilege to have dinner with you. I don't really know a lot of military mumbo jumbo talk, even though my whole family's military and I should. But he is a staff sergeant in the National Guard, and he was talking about what that actually means to be employed currently by the National Guard, but then also be the commander for the county militia, and how that's actually working to his benefit. I know you won all kinds of awards for being like the all-American awesome dude in the country, and you went to Alaska. See, again, I don't understand them. But I can tell you in an hour of talking with this man, he's absolutely the real deal. He's changed the whole state of Virginia. Out of 133 counties, 105 of them are now Second Amendment sanctuary cities. And that's amazing. So I'm not going to flubber this anymore, but I just want you guys to know that, in my opinion, you're standing in front of a person who is literally the drop into the ripple effect that is going to save this nation. So put your hands together for Mr. Dan Abbott. You got your mic on? Is Mr. the right way to introduce you? See, I don't even know. I'm so bad at that. Sure.
Is the lapel mic working? Everybody can hear me? Okay. I feel like I'm way overdressed. I'm also burning up. No one cares if I drop the jacket, right? Roll my sleeves? Okay. Good. All right, and I'm going to roll sleeves too because, like I said, I'm burning up. Yeah, tie doesn't bother me that much. Do we have any Trump fans in the room? A few. Okay. So we've definitely got some Trump fans in the room. I've never seen the kind of political energy that Trump generated, particularly in his bid for re-election. Certainly not in America, not in my lifetime. And I think there's a very specific reason that he has generated that kind of political energy. And I think it's because he represents hope. I think people are placing their hope in Trump. You see those signs like Trump Save Us. You see people all the time talking about Trump saving America. The problem is, I think that hope is misplaced. And it's not because I think Trump is a bad guy. It's not because I think he's not going to do what he says he's going to do or anything like that. I think that hope is misplaced because this is a constitutional republic. It was never built in such a way that it could be saved by a man. It can't be saved by one man, and it can't be saved by a group of men. And when I say a group of men, I mean more specifically 51 senators, 218 congressmen, and or 5 out of 9 justices. This is a government that was commissioned by we the people of these United States. The only ones who can save it are we the people of these United States. We as Americans, particularly those on the right, are very good at blaming government for its own condition. I think most of us recognize that we have a kind of a governmental train wreck right now. And we're very good at pointing the finger and blaming government. Oh, well, those guys that are in office, if the House of Representatives would do their job and appropriately control the purse, we wouldn't have this problem. If we could get a commander-in-chief that would do his job and act like a commander-in-chief, we wouldn't be in this position. If the courts would do their job and check legislation that is unconstitutional, we wouldn't have these problems. But the reality is, what is the Constitution really? It's a delegation of authority. It's we the people commissioning you government, telling government, this is your job and these are the parameters that you're authorized to operate within. And we know that authority can be delegated, but what about responsibility? Can responsibility be delegated? No, can't. So who is responsible for the condition of government in America? That's right. I'm responsible for the condition of government in America. It's a train wreck because I have failed to do my job as an American. I failed to take care of my responsibility to ensure that power resides in the hands of people where it belongs. I think we're fighting, if I had to identify one huge obstacle to me as the commander for a constitutional militia, I would say it's education, or better yet, indoctrination. We like to say that we have public schools. I think that's kind of a misnomer. We don't have public schools, we have government indoctrination centers. And that's not the fault of educators. I don't intend to insult teachers or administrators at the local level, but when you have a federal Department of Education, that department exists to protect its own power base, which is the federal government. So that's what the Department of Education does. In my opinion, it deliberately miseducates people, particularly in the realm of civics, but ultimately in all of the realms of education, particularly in the realm of civics. And it does it, in my opinion, in three very particular ways. The first is we don't know what form of government we have in America. If you poll people on the street, you ask them what form of government do we have in America, 999 out of 1,000 are going to tell you this is a democracy. It is not a democracy. It's not. The second way that it miseducates is we don't know what that form of government, what the form of government that we have is supposed to do. We don't know what its purpose is. Even in a demographic like this, I would guess that we can probably not accurately articulate what the purpose of government in America is. And the third way is we don't know how that form of government is designed to work or how it's designed to function. We just really have no concept of it. So we already established that this is a constitutional republic, right? It's not a democracy. But it's functioning like a democracy, isn't it? Because whenever we talk about anything to do with politics, what are we talking about? Majority, right? We have to have 4 of the 7 board members. We have to have 218 congressmen, 51 senators. We're always talking about a simple majority. Because what is democracy? Mob rule. Yeah, yeah, true. So yeah, that's what I hear most of the time is mob rule. I don't think it's quite as bad as mob rule. I would say that democracy exists to protect the individual liberty of the majority. 51%, right? Which is pretty close to mob rule. Well, what about constitutional republic? Because they're fundamentally different, right? They're not the same form of government. What is the purpose of a constitutional republic? How is it different? Protect the rights of the individual, yep. I would say that it's to protect the individual liberty of the minority, even if that's only one person out of 360 million. But if we want to know exactly what the purpose of government in America is, we have a document that tells us. Does anybody know what that document is? It's the Declaration of Independence. This crowd's pretty good. Usually I get Constitution. It's not the Constitution, it's the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. When a government becomes destructive to these ends, it becomes the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, setting its foundation on such principles as to them would seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. That's the purpose of government in America. That's why we have government, is to protect life, liberty, pursuit of happiness for American citizens. Now, since we've established what the purpose of government in America is, let's do a quick poll. We'll make it multiple choice. What poses the greatest threat to your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in America? Is it foreign power China? Is it Russia and Vladimir Putin? Is it radical Islamic terrorism? Or is it your own government? Huh. That's interesting. Ironic, actually. The greatest threat to our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is our own government. How is that possible? How have we as Americans fallen so far that the institution that we built and placed there to protect our individual liberty poses the greatest threat to it? What has happened? It's broken, right? Somebody said it's broken. I would agree with that too. I would say that government has gotten too big and too powerful. The whole idea was that we built in mechanisms that would prevent government from being able to pose that threat. So what happened? What is supposed to keep government in America in check? What restrains the power of government? We do, okay. A lot of times what I hear, okay, so that's what I hear a lot of times. I hear, well, we've got 3 distinct branches of government, and we have a system of checks and balances that exists within those 3 branches to check the power of government? Or is that to prevent one branch from becoming disproportionately powerful? Okay, so that's what the system of checks and balances does. But what keeps the entire thing from turning into this giant federal monstrosity that tramples all over the 10th Amendment and does whatever they want? Somebody said it, but you're cheating because you know what I'm here to talk about.
We actually talk about this a lot. It's good.
So, the other thing that I call militia is I call it the constitutional enforcement agency. Because we've got the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, right? Supremacy Clause establishes that. The Supreme Court has ruled that on 9 separate occasions, that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are the supreme law of the land. What is true of any other law in America, with the exception of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? Doesn't matter what it is. It could be laws about speeding, fraud, murder, pick your poison, any law you want. What do we know about those laws if we break them? True. So we know within reason what the punishment for violating that law will be, right? You're not going to get the death penalty for speeding, right? So every one of those laws, we understand that between X and Y parameters is going to be the punishment for violation of that law. What about for violation of the supreme law of the land?
Nothing so far.
Okay, well, first we need to establish what does that mean? Because it's really easy for me to stand up here and go, they're breaking the law. That's unconstitutional. They can't do that. Well, is that good enough for us to start executing punishment? Well, no, certainly not, right? So, but we've got a judicial system, right? Within reason. So we would need the court to rule that government was in violation of the Constitution, right? So let's take a case study in New York. I know it's a long ways away. New York passed, and it's probably been 15 years ago now, they passed the New York SAFE Act, which, of course, like most laws, is exactly the opposite of what it means. It's a giant piece of sweeping gun control legislation. And one portion of that was a 7-round magazine capacity limit ban. Anything that carries 7 rounds in a detachable magazine or more is outlawed. Well, of course, that was immediately challenged in the courts. It made its way all the way to the state Supreme Court in New York. And the Supreme Court threw out the 7-round magazine ban. And what they cited is they felt it was unconstitutional because it outlawed every handgun on the market, with the exception of like 2 or 3 like micro handguns. So, all right, well, now we have this environment where the highest court in the land for the state of New York has ruled that the legislators who signed the piece of legislation and the governor who signed it into law have violated the individual liberty of the people of the state of New York. So what happens next? Nothing. Nothing happens because they're above the law. We like to say that they think they're above the law. The reality is they are above the law. So what did the legislature do? They moved the capacity limit ban from 7 rounds to 10 rounds, and that's now the law. Great, huge win. I would say that you're correct. At bare minimum, if you are convicted by the court of violating the individual liberty of the people that you represent, you leave office, you never hold office again. I feel like that's a pretty simple, pretty easy ask. Why don't the courts do that?
They're biased.
Do they have the ability to compel obedience to that?
No.
They don't, do they? What's necessary in order for something to be a law? It has to be an enforcement mechanism, right? If we posted speed limits all over the place, but there were no law enforcement, there were no cops, there were no anything, would it be a speed limit or would it just be a speed suggestion? More guidelines than actual rules, right? So ultimately, government has to have the ability to compel obedience. Because if they don't have the ability to compel obedience, it's not government. It's not law. But what makes America unique? What is one of the things that makes America unique and unusual? Yes, that is unique about America for sure. This is the great American experiment in what? Self-governance. That is unique about America. It's designed so that the American people wield the monopoly on force. Not federal government, not state government. The people maintain the monopoly on force. That's how this is supposed to work, how it's supposed to function. The ability to compel obedience to the law is supposed to belong to the people, so that government is incapable of enforcing a law that the people aren't behind. That's the whole idea. You know, we have this idea in America of power of the people. But do we really know what that means? People say that all the time, and you ask them, well, what does that mean? What's power of the people? Oh, well, we can vote. They voted in Iraq. They vote in Russia. They might vote in China, I don't know. Somehow 98% voted for Saddam Hussein. What about the last presidential election here? Is voting a power? Or is it a request? Request. Please give us the guy we want. That's what voting is. I would argue that there are only two forces or powers on earth, and I'm excluding the power of God. Let's leave him as separate, that we have immediate and direct access to. One of those, of course, is violence. We see that acted out all over the world. We have since the beginning of time with Cain and Abel. Violence is a real force. It's a real power. What is the only other force or power on earth that man has immediate access to that can stop, restrain, or prevent violence? Close. She said guns. I would say that Teddy Roosevelt captured it perfectly when he said, walk softly but carry a big stick. It's threat of force or threat of violence. We all understand this in our everyday lives. We just don't correctly apply it. If you've got some dude that is 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds, lives in the gym, big muscle dude in a too small grunt style t-shirt walking down the street, is he likely to get picked on by bad actors? Are they likely to try to rob him? Probably not. Now, what about the 5'4" blonde-haired girl in yoga pants? More likely? What about the 4'11", 90-year-old lady with the walker, with that little crochet bag that hangs on the front of it? There might be a 38 in there, so. But they're more likely to target her, right? Why? Why are they more likely to target her?
Least resistance.
Because she doesn't carry the same threat of violence that the big burly yoked dude carries, right? What about law enforcement? We understand it through law enforcement too. Shirt and tie means one thing. A badge, a gun, and a duty belt means something else, right?
Yep.
Marked cruiser.
Yep.
They don't have to walk in here and say, I have arrest authority and I can handcuff you, and if I have to, I can use violent force. They don't have to say any of that. Because as soon as they walk in wearing a uniform with a badge and a gun, it's implied. It's passively implied. What about, okay, so only two forces or powers on earth. And if the American people are designed to possess or wield a monopoly on force, let's look at the Second Amendment. Does the Second Amendment say war or violence is necessary to the security of a free state? Nope, sure doesn't. But it says well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state. What is intended by that? Well, first off, going back to our indoctrination, we're miseducated in the realm of English language arts and grammar and things like that. So most people in America have no idea what a semicolon means. There's a semicolon in the middle of that amendment. A semicolon means that you have two separate thoughts, but they don't exist apart from each other. They're joined by that semicolon. One cannot exist independent from the other. So really, when we read the Second Amendment, because again, our indoctrination, when I ask people, what does the Second Amendment say? The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Well, that's the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Shall not be infringed. We stomp our foot for emphasis on shall not be infringed. Okay, yeah, but what does the first half say? Let's reread that. a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, as such or because of this, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the thrust of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is not about individual private defense. It's not about home defense. It's about corporate defense. That's the thrust of the Second Amendment. If you don't believe me, read everything else that was said by the men that wrote that. It's absolutely irrefutable. So Madison is credited as being the primary author of the Constitution. And if we look at Madison's other works, like the Federalist Papers, now I would consider myself to be an anti-Federalist. But if you look at guys like Hamilton and Madison, they were Federalist. And there were people on the Federalist Party that were, so the whole of the Federalist Party was in favor of standing army. But there were two sects in the Federalist Party. Some of them were in favor of only a standing army and not force of arms in the hands of people. And the others, like Madison and Hamilton, were in favor of standing army as long as there was also well-regulated militia. So if you look at Federalist Papers 45 and 46, Madison is talking about that relationship. And Madison says that a standing army is a good thing and they support that, but there must be constitutional or well-regulated militia. And the strength relationship between well-regulated militia and standing army should be such that if there is a standing army, the well-regulated militia should be 20 times greater than whatever the force of arms that the standing army can bring to bear, because the well-regulated militia prevents the people from being able to be abused by the standing army. They feared a standing army, 20 times greater, not double or 5 times, 20 times greater. Well, numerically, absolutely not. The standing army, as far as the army is concerned, is like 520,000. And if we look at, so what is militia? We now establish that it's necessary, but what is it? People. Yep, pitchfork, certainly not. I want no part of a pitchfork. Y'all can have that. Is that a Southern thing?
That's what the sheriff said. Keep your pitchforks away.
Yeah, no, y'all can have the pitchforks. That's not my cup of tea. So when we originally formed Campbell County Militia, let me give you a little bit of history on Campbell County Militia in Central Virginia. So we had a new legislature take over right at the beginning of 2020. And it was liberal majority, and their first thing right out of the get-go before they were even sworn in is, we have all this sweeping gun control legislation that we're going to pass. We're coming and taking your AR-15s. Well, the Virginia legislature does a pretty cool, which I believe is also a unique program, which is they have what they call Lobby Day. So they have one day a year, every time that the legislature is in session at the beginning of the year, where the Capitol is open to the public. If you want to petition your government for a redress of grievances, you can show up just like a lobbyist does and go into the Capitol. You can speak on the floor. You can petition your government for a redress of grievances. So VCDL, which is Virginia Citizens Defense League, their legal/lobby organization that's all about 2A, said, well, we're going to capitalize on Lobby Day. We'll show them petitioning our government. So they did, and estimates are all over the place. Somewhere between 50 and 100,000 people showed up at the Capitol in Richmond. Mobbed every street in sight, completely stopped traffic in the entire downtown area. It was very impressive. Unfortunately, the legislature could care less. They basically just laughed, which is exactly what we expect from them because they have the monopoly on force, right? And so the second and third order effects of that were to a sanctuary resolution movement. And that swept all across the state of Virginia like wildfire. In a matter of like 2 to 3 weeks, you had 105 cities or counties in the state of Virginia that had passed a 2A sanctuary resolution, which, you know, those are a super cool idea, but basically what it boils down to is, hear ye, we don't like this. It's a strongly worded letter is what it is, because it's a resolution, not an ordinance. It's basically a proclamation from that board that says we don't agree with this, and that we're not going to use county assets, we're not going to spend our money to enforce this gun control. State, you have to enforce it yourself. But what that does tell us is it tells us where 105 counties or cities stand. If nothing else, they're willing to verbally defy the state and federal government, which is a good thing. And in response to that, one of the legislators who's out of Newport News, sits in the Virginia House of Delegates, said, if you counties and cities and sheriffs think that you can defy the state, well, you're crazy. We'll nationalize the National Guard. We'll come and remove elected officials, and we'll enforce the law if you don't. So the response to that, what happens when the people are threatened with force of arms? How do you counter force of arms? You have to have force of arms, right? So Bedford County was the first locality that I can find that has conducted a public militia muster since like 1862, before the Civil War. And part of the reason for that is that was one of the conditions to re-enter the Union after the war, is that they were not allowed, states that had seceded were not allowed to maintain well-regulated militia. That was one of the conditions to re-enter the Union, so they had to give up their force of arms. And a little bit of perspective there. This is kind of a tangent, but I'll get back to where I was. Civil War, absolutely enormous numbers-wise. 620,000 casualties, massive, massive forces that are meeting. Any idea how big the Army was? When the American Civil War started, when they fired on Fort Sumter, how many in the Army? Any ideas? 16,000. The entire standing army for the United States of America was 16,000 personnel. So when 1.2 million Union soldiers went to war, who were they? They were militia. Yep, militia. When we went to World War I, the standing army was tiny. It was tiny. All of those were citizen soldiers. All of them. All right, back to where we were. Where were we? Bedford County had the first public militia muster since the 1860s. They had 580 people show up. The sheriff was there, board members were there, members of the Virginia House of Delegates were there. It was in a public park. About 2 weeks later, Campbell County did the exact same thing. We had a public militia muster. House of Delegates were there, City Council was there, Board of Supervisors was there, Sheriff was there. So a muster is basically just a gathering. It's just a military word for gathering. The purpose historically of a muster was to get a count of personnel and to basically inspect the readiness. So they would inspect, make sure that everyone had, and there were requirements in the 1700s as far as you had to have what they called a firelock. You had to have the ability to carry 20 cartridges. There were certain things that they would inspect when they did a muster. We use that word because it's historical, and it puts it in the proper perspective. Because ultimately, when I say the word militia, what do you all think of? Pitchforks. Pitchforks. That's right. We think of guys in BDU camo with ponytails and face paint and Bowie knives, and or we think of the guys in front of the Michigan Capitol building with face masks on and body armor and rifles. It looks like some kind of twisted costume party. It's kind of absurd, honestly. You look at what I would argue are some of the finest men in the history of the world wrote that this was necessary to the security of a free state, and then we look at that and we're like, wait a minute. Something has gone horribly wrong here. So, where was I again? Talking about musters. So Campbell County had like 400 people show up. We ended up with about 250 people that signed up to become members of the Campbell County Militia. And on our muster cards, which had like contact information, name, contact information, cell phone number, stuff like that.
There's one up there.
Oh, we got a muster card up here. Cool. I tell you what, let's just, can we just pass this stuff around, let people look at it? Well, okay, that's what we're going to do. You got on a jacket, we're going to give it to you first. You guys can just pass that stuff around, look at it, whatever. That's a whole bunch of the documentation from CCM. You guys can interrupt me anywhere along the way if there's something in there you want to ask a question about. Yeah?
Who started the muster? I mean, who were the people that brought the people to come together?
Great question.
Because we have politicians that, would no way do any of this.
Well,
Yep.
we met the mayor of Woodstock tonight.
So great question. And her question was, like, whose idea was this? How did this come together? Who scheduled a muster? It was like 8 citizens that got together and said, we need to have a public militia muster. And that was because people were concerned that force of arms was going to come and remove their elected officials, that they were going to take their sheriff and their board members. And they were like, oh, wait a minute, we got to do something to stop this. So we had these muster cards. there's one spot on there where you could check if you were interested in leadership. So we ended up with like, I don't know, 20, 25 people that had checked that box. And so we all got together like a week later around a big conference table in the library. And I'll be honest with you, the first conversation was, we have made a horrible mistake. We are on every list there is to be on. In fact, we're looking around like, I'm surprised the SWAT team hasn't showed up already. We're all in the same place. This is a bad idea. And then we went, well, now wait a minute. Finest men in the history of the world wrote that this was necessary to the security of a free state. That's the only place in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights you can find the word necessary. It's the only place it appears. That's an awful lot of emphasis placed by the finest men in history on the existence of this organization. Why? What were these organizations? What did they look like? How did they function? What made them tick? What was it that made these necessary? So we started doing a deep dive into colonial militia history, trying to figure out what made this work. Why was it so important? And we identified 3 characteristics that we believe had to be present to make these organizations well-regulated and make them necessary to the security of a free state. The first characteristic that we identified, we pulled right out of Virginia Code Section 44-1, and I told you that I would get the Georgia Code section, and I forgot to do it. I will get it to you guys after.
You were driving.
Virginia Code Section 44-1 defines militia in the state of Virginia, and it defines it as having 3 distinct components. The first is the Army National Guard. The second is the Virginia Defense Force, or the VDF. And the third is the unorganized militia, which it further defines as being the whole body of the people, males ages 16 to 55, trained to arms. That's one of the characters. Now, U.S. Title 10, which is also the 1903 National Defense Authorization Act, or the DIC Act, basically says the exact same thing. It changes the parameters, I think, to 18 to 45, and it also includes females that are enlisted in the Army National Guard. But ultimately, it says the same thing. And it's also the same thing that the second half of the Second Amendment says. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the thrust of 44-1 and U.S. Title 10, is that this is the whole body of the people. It is all of the able-bodied or all of the military-aged males are part of unorganized militia. So that is one of the characteristics that I consider to be absolutely key, is these have to be completely public, transparent, overtly public organizations that are made up of the whole body of the people. If you want to be part of this, you can be part of it. That's your right as an American, is to possess force of arms. The second characteristic that we identified is that we found that every community in America had well-regulated militia. Didn't matter, little tiny hamlets, they may have only had 4 rostered members, but they still had one. Why? Why was it so important that every community, even little tiny ones, had this organization? Well, what do we have today, and I don't mean cell phones, that they didn't have in the 1770s? Yeah, communications. A lot of times I get standing army, law enforcement, huge law enforcement departments. What about? We're going to get to that. Don't worry, I will get to that.
More fire pumps?
What about fire departments? Did they have fire departments? No. What about volunteer ambulance corps? Or departments of transportation? Didn't have any of that. What about big civil and commercial construction companies? Nope. Okay. So what happened if a building in town caught on fire? Who do we call? All of the able-bodied men, right? Militia. What if North Carolina happened? Wiped out all the infrastructure, roads and bridges. Who do we call? Ugh. You might be in the wrong place. Yeah, for those of you who didn't hear, she said we call FEMA. I'm tracking. We would call all the able-bodied men. We would call them militia, right? It's interesting. There is a more recent in history rendition of militia doing its job. If we look at the American West, you had a sheriff, the law enforcement officer, and what happened when he needed more manpower? Posse. The able-bodied men in the community? Yes. Sounds like the same thing to me. I don't know. The third characteristic that we identified, or let me back up just a little bit and finish that point. These were not just gunfighters. They were community support, community service organizations. And they should still exist today. Yes, we have fire departments. Yes, we have law enforcement. We have all those things. What is happening right now in North Carolina? Is fire department, ambulance corps, law enforcement, and standing army capable of handling it? No, they're not. The American people are capable of handling it, and that's what's happening in North Carolina, but they're having to start from a negative because they don't already have the organization in place to handle it. You guys already completely understand that because that's something that you guys have been working on for years now. So that is I would say a full 50% of well-regulated constitutional militia is that in, what'd you call it? NERP? Or the CERT teams, because that's what those are. Those are community support, community service organizations. Little bit of a tangent. I have had a ton of guys. I had 20 guys that were down there for a week, and I've basically had some kind of rotating basis of like 2 guys at a time down there ever since. The biggest takeaway that we are pulling out of North Carolina is communications network. So and I know they're here somewhere, those radio guys in the group, the ham guys or whatever they are, that have been preaching communications and radios for years and years and years, and nobody listens to them, we should listen to them.
Oh, we did a whole meeting on that. That's good.
And I would recommend using regular repeater and regular radio networks. The reason that I recommend that is because when everything falls apart like it did in North Carolina, it's not just you guys that need to communicate. You need to be able to communicate with everyone else. And everyone else is more likely to have the ability to communicate on regular repeater and regular radio networks. So have those capabilities and be training on them. That doesn't mean don't have other encrypted platforms and whatever, but definitely have the ability to communicate with people so that when stuff gets sideways, you have the ability to take care of your responsibility as men and women who are invested in this community to take care of your community. All right. Back to our 3 characteristics. The third characteristic is the quality of character of the men that led those organizations and steered those ships, which is Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Patrick Henry and John Adams and Sam Adams and Hamilton and Madison, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. And again, some of the finest men in the history of the world. What else do we know about those men? They were very young, which that whole mentality that, oh yeah, this history stuff, it's just a bunch of old white men, is absolute nonsense. You had men that signed the Declaration of Independence that were 18, 19, and 20 years old. Now, what else was true about men that signed the Declaration of Independence? Is this just whoever felt like signing it, and you've got some young, wild punk kid that's like, yeah, I'll sign that thing? They're the most influential men in the entire colonies at 18, 19, and 20. So that is my favorite part. I mean, you guys heard me quote a big chunk of the preamble, but that is my favorite part of the Declaration of Independence. And it is actually, so if you guys ever see the Declaration of Independence, not a transcript of it, but the actual document, there's a couple of phrases in the Declaration that they printed in bold. On the very last line, the very last sentence, they printed the first half of the very last sentence in bold, which comes right before what she just said, which is we mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honors. Do you guys know what the portion in bold says? With a firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, we mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. They felt that that was so important. I think there's only 3 or 4 spots in the entire document, but that is one of them, with a firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence. Try to tell me this is not a Christian nation. Try to tell me that this was not bought and paid for by Christian men. Because it was. So, yes, they were young. What else do we... the men that led these organizations and steered these ships, what else do we know about them? They were already leaders. They weren't some wacko that came out of the creeks and the hollers and joined the militia and then somehow became this great leader. They were the men that were already identified in their communities. Who were they? They were mayors of towns. They were pastors of churches. They were businessmen, merchants, lawyers. They were the men who already led their communities. And they understood that they had an additional responsibility to lead well-regulated militia. They're the same men today. It is the men who are the pastors of the churches and the mayors of the town, that are the chiefs of the volunteer fire departments, that are the police chiefs, the sheriffs, non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers in the National Guard or in the Georgia Defense Force, the coach of the Little League, the guy that owns a large local business, the men that are already leaders are supposed to be leading here too, because that's their responsibility. Part of our responsibility as biblical men. What is part of our responsibility as biblical men? It's to protect the weak and the innocent, correct? Am I supposed to protect my family?
Yes.
Darn right I am. What about my church? What about my community? I don't remember if I said it already or not. The Second Amendment is not just about home defense, it's about corporate defense. That's part of our responsibility as a biblical man, is corporate defense. So I was talking to some guys earlier, all y'all that are already on the path of like church security teams and whatever, absolutely the right answer. That's part of your responsibility as biblical men, is to protect those inside your sphere of influence. What about, okay, so family, church, community, surrounding area. What about anywhere that I'm geographically located? Do I have a responsibility to you guys right now? Sure do. I absolutely do. So what does that mean? And this is a tangent, but I think it's an important tangent, and I also believe it's really going to resonate with you guys, so we're going to go in that direction, and we'll come back. In order for me to do that job, as a biblical man, in order to protect the weak and the innocent in my sphere of influence, what do I have to have? What do I have to be? What do I have to do? Absolutely true. Yep. Yeah, integrity, everything that goes along with being a moral and biblical man, yes. What about physicality? Do I have a responsibility to maintain my physicality so that I can protect the weak and the innocent? Sure do. So does that mean that I should be in the gym lifting weights? Not necessarily, but certainly wouldn't hurt. What about nutrition? Is that part of it? Heck yeah, it is. What about proper tools? If somebody comes in the door with any kind of weapon, doesn't have to be a gun, what am I going to do if I'm unarmed? Probably in big trouble. Probably in big trouble. So do I need to have the correct tools?
Yes.
Yep. Probably take the correct tools with me everywhere I go.
Yes.
Goes everywhere that I go. What about, does this do me any good if I don't know how to use it?
No.
Doesn't. In fact, I'm more of a danger if I don't know how to use it, right? So should I have the proper training to be able to correctly employ the tool that I carry?
Yes.
Yep. What about this? Does anybody know what this is?
It's like an ankle thing.
Yep, ankle IFAC. Tourniquets, chest seals, quick clot, nasal airways. Should I have this kind of stuff at my disposal?
Yes.
Heck yeah. What about the training to use it? Definitely. I feel like I'm probably saying stuff that doesn't need to be said because I know you guys are already moving in that direction, so I probably don't need to beat that dead horse. Let's, since we're on that topic anyways, you know, I said that it's our responsibility, right? The condition of our government is our responsibility. I'm not into blame shifting. I will own the responsibility for the condition of my government. There is one exception to my no blame shifting. There is one place other than myself that I would lay some of the responsibility and some of the blame for the condition of my country. Does anybody want to take a stab at it? Bingo. The American Christian Church. I would lay it at the feet of the pulpits, because the churches in America have completely and utterly failed in what I would consider to be three huge ways. Or I'm really stuck on that three thing, but anyways. One is, it is the church's job and the church's responsibility to steer culture and to steer government. Please show me in the Constitution where you can find separation of church and state. You won't find it, it's not there. The idea behind separation of church and state is that there is not to be a state church. Government cannot tell the church what to do. That does not mean that the church can't tell government what to do. That is exactly what the church should be doing, is telling government what to do. They should be steering culture and telling government what to do, ensuring that government is moral. Because I believe it was Franklin, maybe somebody here can correct me. Somebody said that this constitutional republic is only good for a Christian and moral people. Is wholly inadequate to govern any other. Is that correct? Is that Franklin? Okay, okay, good. I hate misquoting stuff, which occasionally happens. Two other ways that the church has failed is, for whatever reason, the American church has promoted, and part of that failing in the realm of influencing government is they sold their soul to the devil with 501c3. Oh, we can't talk about politics because we're tax exempt. Huge mistake. I don't care if your church is tax exempt, but if they use that to muzzle themselves, now we have a problem. Another way that they have failed is that the American church is really, really good at sitting on their hands and praying that God acts. The American church stands on the tracks and pray that God stops the train. And all we have to do is step off the tracks. Why am I going to ask the Almighty to work a miracle and stop the freight train when I can step off the tracks? There's a stupid little joke that runs around in Christian circles, which is very, very true. You guys have probably all heard it. There is this pastor, and he's in the storm surge area as the hurricane's coming, and a police cruiser comes by and says, "Father, there's a mandatory evacuation. You got to get out of here. You're going to drown." And he says, "Oh, no, the Lord will protect us." And then the water comes up, and the National Guard truck comes by, and they try to evacuate him. No. And then I think a boat comes by when they're on the second story, and then a helicopter when they're on the roof, and ultimately they get washed away and drowned. And he stands in front of God and says, "Lord, I had all the faith in the world that you were going to save us and protect us. Why didn't you save us?" He said, "I did. I sent a cruiser, I sent a truck, I sent a boat, and a helicopter." Sometimes we just need to act. That's part of our responsibility as biblical Christian men, is to be men of action. It is not to sit on our hands and pray that God does things that He has given us the ability to do ourselves. If somebody comes in the door of this building and they are hungry, are you going to pray that God feeds them, or are you going to feed them? We're going to feed them. If somebody comes in that door right now with a rifle, am I going to pray that God sends some other man to save me, or am I going to unholster and go to work? I'm going to unholster and go to work. But we're commanded to be constantly in prayer, right? Certainly are. So I'm going to unholster and go to work, and as I do, I'm going to pray that the Almighty guides my hands. Because that's what being constantly in prayer means. It doesn't mean that we sit there on our hands all the time and just pray that God does for us. It's that we move out and pray, "Lord, if I'm moving in the wrong direction, close the door. And I'll move in a different direction." It is not that we sit there and pray, "Lord, show me the way. Lord, show me the way. Lord, show me the way." Move out. Christian men are called to be men of action. They are doers, not sit on their handers. It's not our job as men. The third way that the American church has completely and utterly failed is we have completely and utterly failed to build masculine biblical men. The American church should be building biblical badasses. That's what they should be doing. They should be promoting physicality. They should be promoting nutrition. They should be promoting the capability to execute violence. That's part of our job as a man, as a biblical man. You look at all the men that the Bible props up, he gives us as an example of this is what Christian men should look like and act like. The vast majority of them are warriors. All of them are masculine men. David's called a man after God's own heart, right? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. This man doesn't have a little bit of blood on his fingertips. He's blood all the way to his elbows. We misrepresent the stories that we find in Scripture. David and Goliath is a perfect example, since we're already talking about David. What is the story that we get told? It's told like a nursery rhyme. Small, cute child slays mighty giant with stone. That's the end of the story. Most people know that he takes Goliath's sword and cuts his head off. And then what happens? That's right. He holds it up, picks up the severed head. Does he hold it up to the Israeli army to show them that he's actually dead? No. He holds it up to the Philistine army. Who's standing in the front row of the Philistine army? Goliath's brothers. Holds it up to the man's family. This is what my God will do to you. Who else wants some of this? And then what does he do? Where's the next place that David goes after the field? Ultimately, yes. But before he makes it to the city gate, where does he go? He stands in front of Saul. And the Bible makes a point to mention that as he stands in front of Saul, he does it with a severed head in his hand. The Bible thought that it was important. The Almighty thought that it was important for us to know that. And then what does he do with it? You nailed it. He takes it to Jerusalem and puts it on a pike. It's not the story that we get. You know, I think I would consider you guys to be fairly conservative or contemporary Christians, whatever, however you want to say that. And most of you probably recognize that we have been told that there's not a description of the physical appearance of Christ in the Bible, right? So we look at that picture that, has got, it's always like these long flowing Fabio locks, and there's this soft light behind it, and everything is pastel colors, and it's a very nice picture. And most of us would say, well, yeah, we don't know what Christ looked like. That's kind of a bad depiction. I'm not sure that's true. We do have a physical description in the Bible of the person of Jesus Christ and his physical appearance. Do you know where it is? It's the book of Revelation. When he returns as a conquering warrior. White robe, sharp two-edged sword coming out of his mouth, the name King of Kings and Lord of Lords written on his thigh. And what happens there? The armies of the world are arrayed against him, and he slaughters them. The blood in the streets of Jerusalem is up to the bridle on his horse. That's the physical description of the person of Jesus Christ that we have. I think most people will... I would say that there's probably a couple of places in Scripture that there are pre-incarnate appearances of Christ. But I think most anyone would agree with there is one definitive, which is when he wrestles with Jacob. So the one that everyone would accept as a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, he has a physical altercation with Jacob. Why does the American Christian church promote that men should be weak and effeminate? It's not in the Bible. There is a gross misrepresentation of what is meant by passages like the meek shall inherit the earth. We read that as weak. The American church promotes that as weak. That is not what that word means. I had been told that meek means power under control. I think that's probably fairly accurate. I heard, what the heck is his name? That Christian psychologist. Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was talking about the translation to the word meek, and he thinks that's a poor translation. He believes the way that should be translated is, men who have swords and know how to use them but keep them sheathed shall inherit the earth. Sounds like a lot better translation. It also makes a lot more sense. Interesting. Other passages of Scripture that are taken out of context. How about turn the other cheek? How many have heard that? What is that talking about?
The way that it says which part of the hand.
I don't know if it's which part of the hand, but one man to another. If I slap you in the face, it's an insult, right? Yeah, it's a bad idea. You're right. How insulting would it be to me if I slapped you in the face and you looked at me and went, "That's the best you got"? Might as well slap the other side too. That's what the Bible's talking about there. They're talking about when a man insults another man. Does that mean that when someone poses a threat to my wife and family that I should turn the other cheek? No. No, it certainly does not mean that. That passage is being taken out of context and grossly misrepresented. What about, are we as biblical men commanded to be peaceful? Yes, we absolutely are. We absolutely are. Is peace a virtue according to the Bible? Yes, it is, unequivocally. What do I have to be capable of to be considered peaceful?
Great acts of violence.
Nailed it. Need to be capable of great violence. Because if I'm not capable of great violence, am I peaceful?
Oh, you're weak.
I'm weak. Now I'm just harmless. we all understand this culturally, we just don't correctly apply it. Let's say school cafeteria. We've got our guy from our analogy earlier, 6'5" Captain America looking dude. And he's picking on the 5'5", 120-pound dude. He's picking on him and messing with his food and just giving him a hard time. And the 5'5" dude decides, you know what, that dude's going to kick my butt, forget this, I'm out of here, and he leaves. What do we tell him? What is the cultural advice that we would give to him? You have to what? Stand up to the bully, right? Even though you know you're going to get your butt kicked, you need to show him you're not afraid of him. You need to stand up to the bully. What if the roles are reversed? Captain America's eating his lunch. 5'5", just keeps picking on him and picking on him and picking on him and messing with his food and taking his stuff and just harassing him constantly. And Captain America dude decides, you know what, it is what it is, it's not worth it. He walks away. Then what do we say? What great self-control. He could have beat the snot out of that little punk, but he chose to exercise restraint and chose to walk away. Then it's virtuous because he's capable of the violence, but chose to restrain it. That's when peace becomes virtuous. It's only virtuous if we're capable of the violence, but choose not to. Lots of people like to throw out the Old Testament. Okay, let's throw out the Old Testament. Let's look at the New Testament. What about Christ at the Last Supper? What is one of the questions that he asked the disciples? How many swords do you have? And what did they say? 2? And he said, it's enough. And then what did he say? If you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy a sword. Now, keep in mind, these men are basically nomadic. The only real earthly possession that they have is their cloak. Sell your cloak and buy a sword. What is he talking about? What does he mean when he says a sword? Is this a machete? Can we chop coconuts with it? Or is it an axe? Can we dry steaks or chop firewood with it? Can't do any of that. What is he talking about? He's talking about a Roman gladius, right? Which is literally the sharp two-edged sword. It's got a huge blood groove down the side of it. What is a Roman gladius designed to do? What is the job of a Roman gladius? It has one purpose. Kill other men. That is the only thing that a Roman gladius does. Oh yeah, and it provides a threat of violence. Interesting. What happens to the Garden of Gethsemane? Peter cuts the ear off the high priest's servant, right? Yep. And again, I think we sanitize that story. Make it sound like it was some kind of a surgical strike to scare the guy off, like, oh, cut his ear off and then they'll run away. No. He's trying to cut the man's head off. Guy probably ducked, got a glancing blow. And what does Christ do? That's right, puts the ear back on. Does he rebuke Peter? He does. He does rebuke Peter. But what does he say specifically? Bingo. Now is not the time. He doesn't say, what are you doing with that awful weapon of war? Where did you get that thing? Why in the world would you do something like that? No. What's happening tonight must happen. Now is not the time. Which means there is a time. He intended for his disciples to have the ability to execute violence. Bottom line. So we've horribly missed our way as the American church. If even half of the men who claim to be Christian in America were half of the biblical masculine badasses that they should be, we would never be in the position that we're in as a nation. It would never, ever happen. Interesting side note on that. If you look back to the Reformation, the pillars of the faith, the masculine biblical men, they had titles in addition to their names, right? Can anybody tell me what any of those titles were? The lion-hearted, the courageous, the bold. Where are those men in America today? Where are men that not just men that we could look at and be like, oh yeah, that dude is courageous, but dudes whose name is courageous? Why is it that we take passages of Scripture like love thy neighbor so seriously, but we ignore passages that say be strong and courageous? What do we suppose that means? When the Bible says be strong and courageous, what does that mean? It means to be physically strong and to be courageous. What is courageous? What is being courageous? What is being brave? Is it the absence of fear? No, it's continuing to act even though you're afraid. Why do we not take those passages seriously? Why is it just the other ones? Why have we allowed the barbaric murder of those who are truly innocent in America for so long? Christian men, why do we let that happen? Well, it's not because we were strong and courageous. It's because we've been miseducated by the American Christian church for so long. Okay, how in the world am I going to figure out where I was in the other thing before the tangent?
We're talking about the qualities of what it takes to be part of, the characteristics and qualities of what it takes to be part of the militia.
Okay.
You went into the founding fathers after talking about the county.
Right,
And the church.
okay. So, yeah. You had men that were leaders of the church, and that's right. That's how I got onto that tangent, is because we talked about the Declaration of Independence with a firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, and okay. So,
The last question you asked was what makes up the militia?
okay. So, whole body of the people, all the military-aged males, and okay. So now we know what the makeup of that should look like. What is the purpose of militia? What's the purpose of militia? That is one part of it. Again, there are three parts to the purpose of militia. She said it enforce the Constitution. Yes? That's true. That's kind of part of the same thing that she was saying, which is to enforce law. All right, so Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 of the U.S. Constitution tells us that Congress shall call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, repel invasion, and suppress insurrection. That's the purpose of well-regulated constitutional militia. Enforce the laws of the Union, repel invasion, suppress insurrection. We already established that I believe that the intent of the Second Amendment is a passive threat of force or threat of violence. Do we believe that all three of those missions can be accomplished through that passive threat? I would say yes. I would say the biggest ask is to repel foreign invasion. Anybody? Yeah, right on. Build the wall.
Send all the truckers to the wall. Let's just build it. Need permission.
Anybody familiar with Admiral Yamamoto? Imperial Japan? Did you guys know that he studied at Harvard before the war? He's got two particular, yeah, somebody just said it. He has two particular quotes that he is rather famous for. He was vehemently opposed to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, by the way. And after they bombed Pearl Harbor, what did he say? We awakened a sleeping giant. I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant. He was correct. Does anybody know what Churchill said when he found out that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor? Something to the effect of, I will sleep well tonight like I have not slept in a long time. There is finally hope we're going to win. That'll tie into something a little bit later on. So somebody over here already said it. What is the other thing that Admiral Yamamoto is famous for saying? Having studied here and knowing America, what did he say? That's right. Somebody asked him about invading the mainland. He said, we would never invade America. There would be a gun behind every blade of grass. Why did he say that? He knew we were well armed. Did you know there were 60 million fatalities in World War II? 60 million. Yeah, you hear all sorts of noise about the 6 million people that were killed or that died in concentration camps in Germany. Well, where is all of the rest of that casualties come from? Well, there were a lot of Russians that were killed. They come from Japan's war against China. Over 30 million Chinese were killed by Imperial Japan. They invaded China and killed 30 million people, and they would never invade America because there would be a gun behind every blade of grass. Tell me that threat of violence doesn't work. It works. What about Suppressing insurrection. Can it do that through a passive threat? Heck yeah. I can tell you where there's not going to be any riots in Central Virginia. Campbell County. Because I've got 500 rostered members. You'd have to be some kind of lunatic knucklehead to decide that that was the locality where you were going to go have a riot. Obviously, the sheriff has got some support there. What about the first? Execute the laws of the Union. What is intended by that? Well, one part of it I think we kind of already touched on. If the sheriff in a locality needs some additional manpower, he can call on the people, right? Well, what's the other part of it? What's the supreme law of the land in America?
Constitution.
Constitution and Bill of Rights, right? Who enforces that? At this point, yes. Well, I would argue that well-regulated militia is the constitutional enforcement agency. It is the entity that was purpose-built into the Bill of Rights to enforce the laws of the Union, to enforce the supreme law of the land. Because the Constitution doesn't apply to me, unless I'm wearing my National Guard uniform, then it does. But generally speaking, it doesn't apply to me, it doesn't apply to you. It applies to government. That's rules for them. It's not rules for you. It's rules for government. And who enforces that? Well, the people are supposed to. But they have to have a mechanism to do that. I can't do it as myself. There has to be an entity. You know, there's a huge difference between people who have guns and well-regulated militia. It's not the same. It's not the same at all. Interesting quote that goes along those same lines, and it's something I'll tie into a little bit later. I believe it was Burgoyne, but don't quote me on that. Very, very early on in the American Revolution, he made the statement that it is of paramount importance that governments promote the idea that a standing army is invincible to any number of rabble. And that idea was called into question on April 19th. Lexington and Concord. Called into question the idea that the standing army was invincible. Thank God, I lost my train of thought again. One of y'all must be distracting me. I don't usually have this big a problem. Well, while I'm stalled, does anybody have any questions thus far?
I do. What's the difference between an unofficial and official militia?
You mean between organized and unorganized?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so there's history behind that too. So we go, okay, well, we talk about Code Section 44-1 and U.S. Title 10 and all of these other laws and all of these other states that talk about unorganized militia. Well, if we organize and train and have a rank and command structure, is it still unorganized militia? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You need to understand the history behind the terminology to understand that. So what took place is going all the way back to, let's see here, 1609, 2 years after the Quakers landed at Plymouth, they realized, hey, this whole pacifist thing does not work. We need militia. So the first militia laws in the colonies go all the way back to 1609. What was true of those militia laws all the way across the colonies and across the ocean as well? They were compulsory. You had to serve. You were required to. That was part of your responsibility as a man, was that you were a member of the militia. In fact, if you didn't serve, you paid a fine. You actually kind of had the choice. You could choose not to serve, but if you didn't serve, you were going to fund it. Everyone had to serve. It was compulsory. And that was the case and actually enforced all the way up through the American Revolution and after the American Revolution up through like the War of 1812. And then somewhere after the War of 1812, we stopped enforcing compulsory service. And then, of course, after the American Civil War, that right was stripped from the states that seceded. And so that was really the death of militia or unorganized militia. So after the American Revolution, somewhere there in the neighborhood of the War of 1812, before or after in that ballpark, they stopped enforcing that compulsory military service or compulsory militia service. And so what happened when they stopped enforcing it is a lot of those organizations significantly diminished. So basically what ended up happening is you had a whole bunch of people that got together and went, well, you know what, this is not really working. People are not showing up. We don't have the funding for it. This has just been made not a priority, but we still think this is really important. We're going to get together and we're going to train and we're going to buy our own weapons and our own uniforms, and we are going to make sure that we are ready because government is failing to do their job in maintaining well-regulated militia. Interestingly, there is a principle that's found in the Declaration of Independence that very, very much applies to the idea of militia. So is it government's job to maintain well-regulated militia?
No.
It is.
Well, they're funded.
It is their job to maintain it. That is something that we delegated the authority to government, said, hey, government, this is your job. You need to maintain well-regulated militia. You need to make sure that these guys are supplied and trained and have rank and command structure. It's a delegated authority. In the Declaration of Independence, they are talking about the fact that the King and Parliament had repeatedly dissolved our representative houses and failed to establish another. And what do they say when they're talking about that? Said, because you have repeatedly dissolved our representative houses and failed to establish another, legislative powers, which are incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. We delegated authority to you, but we can't delegate the responsibility. If I work for you and you give me a job to do and I fail to do the job, let's say,
Like Kamala?
all right, better yet, I own a construction company. You own a piece of property, you want to have a house built. And Shannon, you work for me, you're one of my project managers. You and I sit down, we go over site plan and blueprints and budget and all of this stuff, and we pick out colors and everything. And I take all of that, we've agreed, we got a signed contract, and I turn it over to Shannon. And I say, Shannon, go forth and conquer. Here's the checkbook, the employees, the trucks, everything. You got to take care of this gentleman, make this happen. And she doesn't do it.
Holding you responsible.
Bingo, he's holding me responsible. I don't get to say, oh, well, that's Shannon's problem. No. I delegated authority to Shannon. The responsibility is mine. No one else ever owns that. The same thing is true with legislative powers. They're incapable of annihilation, so the responsibility to make sure that legislative power is maintained belongs to the people. When government fails to do the job, it's our job to do the job. Same thing is true with militia. When government is failing to do their job, militia, God-given right to self and corporate defense, is incapable of annihilation. If government doesn't do its job, it returns to the people at large for its exercise.
So we don't have an organized militia anymore. Do we couldn't consider the military that?
So, excellent question. So what she asked is, do we consider the military to be organized militia? Let's go back to what we were originally talking about as far as the organized versus unorganized. So when those organizations failed to be properly maintained, people like y'all got together and said, well, this power is incapable of annihilation. We need to maintain this ourselves. So they bought their own weapons. They did their own training. They functioned as themselves. What does government always do? It always takes the better name for itself and gives the other name to the people. So government claimed the name organized militia, and they called all of those much better trained, operating at a much higher level militias the unorganized militia, even though they were superior in every way.
It's like Greenland and Iceland, isn't it?
So that's where the use of those terms comes from, is that organized militia was the government-sanctioned, government-run militia, which is now National Guard. Realistically, those are citizen soldiers, that's the National Guard. The unorganized militia has always been and will always continue to be the whole body of the people. Now, should the whole body of the people be trained? Yes, absolutely they should. In fact, I think that it should be the responsibility of the National Guard, the guys like me that get paid, to make sure that our communities are trained.
Can we do that? How do we make that happen?
I don't know. I don't know.
To do it.
And here's the problem. At the state level, I think that's achievable. But here's the problem. So 1903 National Defense Authorization Act. What happened there is Spanish-American War. Whenever the nation needed to go to war, prior to the 1903 National Defense Authorization Act, or even after that really, we had to call militia. If you look at the Declaration from Lincoln at the start of the American Civil War, what does he say? This state, you have to provide X number of militia. This state, you have to provide X number of militia. He's telling the states how many militiamen they have to supply. Same thing happened when we went to war in the Spanish-American War, or the Mexican-American War, one of those. They said, hey, states, you need to supply X number of personnel for the Army. Incidentally, that's where the name volunteer state comes from for Tennessee, is because they sent so many volunteers. They sent a lot more than what they were required to send, so they started calling them the volunteer state. They were also extremely well trained and extremely well organized. So anyway, what happened is, that very small nucleus of professional military showed up to the Spanish-American War, and they had dudes from Tennessee that were super squared away. They had great rank and command structure. They were extremely well equipped. They were well drilled. They were good marksmen. They were a dialed military fighting force. And then you had people that came from places like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Massachusetts that were a train wreck. They didn't have uniforms. They didn't have weapons. They didn't have any kind of established command structure. They didn't know anything about tactics. And military officers went, this is a disaster. We don't have any way to make this work. There's no uniformity. There's no anything that we can work with here. We're starting from nothing. What's the point? So that's where the 1903 National Defense Authorization Act came from, because they said we need standards across the nation so that everybody is operating with the same deck of cards. So, yeah, then the government says, okay, all of you states, these are the parameters. This is what you have to do. This is how you have to train. This is the weapons you have to have. And the states went, wait, you can't tell us to do that. We don't have the money for that. We can't afford all these guns and officers and training and all that. We can't afford that. We don't have the money for it. So then what did the federal government do? We'll provide the funding. We'll provide the funding. You just have to meet the standard. So in the state of Virginia, for every $1 that the state of Virginia spends on the Army National Guard, how many do you think come from the Department of Defense, from the feds? Somebody was very, very close. Who said 24? 27. For every $1 that the state of Virginia spends, the Department of Defense spends $27. So are those state troops or are they federal troops? Who pays for it? Feds do. So they're much closer to federal troops than they are to state troops. Now, do they answer to the governor? Yeah, they do. But is the governor going to defy the feds? Nope, because then the money disappears. Now, are they just going to strip all the funding? No, probably not. But what will they do? They'll say, oh, well, we don't really have the money to send you guys to JRTC this year. That's a Joint Readiness Training Facility in Louisiana. What happens if you don't go to JRTC? You don't get validated. If you don't get validated, what do you not get to do? You don't get to go on deployment. What happens when a unit goes on deployment? They're 100% federally funded. New uniforms, new boots, new body armor, new guns, all of the money to train. Now, all of a sudden, there's this trickle-down effect, so the government's not just going to come out and say, oh, no, we're pulling all your funding. Yeah, we don't really have the money to send you guys to JRTC this year. And the trickle-down effect of that is that they lose a massive amount of federal funding. So ultimately, that's how they keep the National Guard in line. That's how they keep the states in line, is by controlling the flow of money, which is the same thing that the state does. All the money moves from the counties to the state, and then the state decides if you can have it back or not based on whether or not you've had good behavior, because that's what they do, right? If a sheriff speaks out against the state, what do they say? Oh, we're going to pull that law enforcement funding. You're going to have to lay some people off.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, of course.
So, let's say, for example, they pass a law banning nuclear guns in Georgia.
Okay.
It's up to the sheriff department to enforce that law. So, if the sheriff department at that point has the option of, I'm going to enforce this or I'm not going to enforce this, at that time, are they organized or unorganized militia?
I'm not sure I'm following you. Are we talking about like if the sheriff deputized?
I'm talking about
National Guard.
deputy in the sheriff department as the whole congregation. Let's say sheriff said, okay, deputies, you are now enforcing this law. And they looked at him and said, no.
I believe that's what they should do. How many of you guys have seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven? Kingdom of Heaven? It's purely entertainment. But there's one statement in there, and it's where the main character is talking to the King of Jerusalem. And the King of Jerusalem tells him that it is a kingdom of conscience or none at all. That you have to do what is morally right no matter what. Somewhere in here, where's the gentleman? Were you the Vietnam vet? There was a massacre in Vietnam, and the defense that some of those soldiers tried to use was that that was the order that I was given. Did that stand up? No, it didn't. Because I can't use that as an excuse. Oh, I was told to do such and such. That doesn't fly. So as a non-commissioned officer in the Army, it is my responsibility every time I am issued an order. So I swore an oath, right?
Yep.
As a non-commissioned officer, I swear an oath. Raise my right hand, left hand on the Bible. I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and bear true faith and allegiance to the same, right? And to obey the what? Oh, interesting. Key word. Lawful orders of the officers placed over me, the President of the United States and Governor of Virginia or Georgia or whatever. So I have a responsibility to evaluate every order that I am issued and determine, is it legal, is it moral, is it ethical? Because someday I'm going to stand in front of the Almighty. That's not going to fly. Oh, my commander told me to do it. No, that doesn't fly. So I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly what sheriff's deputies should be doing, is if they receive an order that is unlawful, illegal, that's the same thing, illegal, immoral, or unethical, they have a responsibility to deny that order. I'm not sure what the relationship that you're drawing between sheriff's department and organized and unorganized is.
So I explained why I was asking it before I asked the question itself.
Oh, okay.
It's more of, as a standard, regardless of that situation, is the sheriff's department considered organized or athletic?
Well, they're kind of in a separate category because they're law enforcement. Now, I think that the sheriff should have at his disposal the people in the community. I think he should have, militia doesn't fall under the authority of government or under the authority of the sheriff necessarily. So in Campbell County, I have basically a four-part united front, which is the Commonwealth's attorney, which you guys don't have Commonwealth's attorney, you have district attorney? Okay. So district attorney, board of supervisors or city council, sheriff, and unorganized militia. The force of arms that the whole body of the people provide. So what was the threat that, and maybe I didn't tell you guys that. No, I did. One of the legislators threatened that they were going to nationalize the Guard and remove elected officials. Should my sheriff have to stand out there and say, nope, you can't come near my people, I'm going to protect them, and I've got these deputies that are going to stand with me? I don't think that's the appropriate dynamic. I think the appropriate dynamic is that we, the people, stand in front. No, those are our elected officials. If you want to remove my sheriff, you come through me and you come through all of these people. Because those are our elected officials. What is the overarching idea that constitutional republic is built around? Doctrine of the lesser magistrate, right? You guys are probably all familiar with that. In a nutshell, doctrine of the lesser magistrate is that power should reside at the lowest level where it's most easily accessed and most easily influenced by the people. That's lesser magistrate in a nutshell. So we see that captured in the first half of the Second Amendment. Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of what? Free state. Not necessary to the security of the nation, not necessary to the security of the republic, necessary to the security of a free state. For perspective, does anybody know how many registered voters there were in the state of Virginia when the Constitution was ratified in 1789? Now, keep in mind, the state of Virginia included all of West Virginia and included giant portions of Ohio and Kentucky, ran all the way to the Mississippi River. The state was huge. It was the largest colony. Any idea how many registered voters? 78,000 registered voters. 490,000 residents, 78,000 registered voters in the entire state of Virginia. What does that sound like today? Cherokee County here, right? How many residents? 200 plus. What about the city of Atlanta? How many residents are there? Interesting. Really, those lesser magistrates today are cities and counties. That's where force of arms belong, and that's where militia belongs. Militia is not the standing army. It's not even the state National Guard. It belongs in the hands of people. Somebody brought this, which is super cool. So, and this is a county?
That's Cherokee.
Yeah, so this is Cherokee County, and this is when it was broken down by militia districts. Not voting districts, it was broken down by militia districts.
Thank you, Richard Jordan.
The idea is that force of arms belongs at the local level. Why? Why is it so important that it's at the local level? Well, how easily accessible is the National Guard? It's really not that accessible. The painfully slow pace to mobilize the National Guard to do anything in a community, it's days. It takes forever. But what about an organization that is right there in your community, in your town, in your voting precinct thing? So much easier, makes so much better sense.
Judge
Now,
Nally would say because you needed to enforce
I'm
the
going to
petition to grand jury.
see if I can. Well, you're not wrong about that, because it's part of its job is to enforce the laws of the union. I don't know if you guys can take pictures of that or not. Maybe we stand it on there. I think that's just to make the lines easier to see. I'll be honest with you, I just found that a few minutes ago. I've never seen it before. I think it's awesome. It also drives home the idea of the lesser magistrate. Now, I say it puts power in the hands of people where it's most easily accessed and most easily influenced by the people. Well, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by the power residing there and it being easily accessed and easily influenced? Well, I mean it in a whole bunch of different ways. Election-wise, did we have any influence over the last presidential election?
No, totally secure.
None, right? What about elections in Cherokee County? Do we have influence over the outcome of elections in Cherokee County? I would say that we have more. All right, hold on. Let me explain what I mean. What was the vote counts for the last presidential election? Like 80 to 80, right? Million people. How much does your vote mean? Not much. How much does you campaigning actually mean in an election where you've got 160 million people voting? Tiny, tiny bit. What's the vote spread for elections for, what do you guys have? Do you have a board of supervisors or commissioners or county commissioners? What is the vote spread? If you have a contested race, you have two guys running for the same seat, how many votes separate those candidates when you're all said and done?
Anywhere between
Typically.
2 to 700, depending, but it's about a 20 to 30,000 vote option. That's how many votes are about per district. 400.
400. Can we influence the outcome of an election that's separated by 400 votes?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We absolutely can. So if we have, and I guarantee that this has happened, at some point you guys have had a commissioner that was doing a shitty job, and you all got together and said, that dude's got to go.
Amen.
We're going to campaign against him. We're going to vote him out. And you did. All right, let's do it again. What about
We're thinking now, we got 2 years, 4 years.
what about election integrity? Can we verify that we have national election integrity? No. Heck no. What about in your voting precinct? Not even just in the whole county. What about your precinct that you vote in? Do we have the ability to get together enough people to ensure that we have election integrity, free and fair elections in one precinct? You're right, the machines have got to go. You're right, the machines have got to go. But we have much, much more control over stuff that's at that level. Now, what is the other thing that is true when I say that we have access and influence? Who's your state senators? So you have 2 state senators.
Oh, senators, sorry.
Or I'm sorry, not state senators, your national senators for the state of Georgia. Well, it doesn't matter who they are ultimately. So you have 2 senators that represent the state of Georgia. When is the last time that you actually had a conversation with one of them? Never. Have you ever? You're proving my point. You're proving my point.
Because I'm bringing my pitchfork.
I like that.
I'll give you.
What happens when we elect them? U.S. congressmen, U.S. senators, what happens when we elect them to go to Washington? They go to Washington, right?
They were selected, not
We,
elected.
okay, fair point, but we don't have access to them. They are gone. They're in D.C., that's where they live, that's where they work. Who do they work for? Do they work for us? We like to say they work for us, right? But do they? Does anyone know what the salary for a U.S. congressman is? Almost. It's $172,000 plus all the stipends and whatever other stuff that they add on to. It's probably well over $200,000. What about commissioners, county commissioners? What is their salary?
County commissioner?
17. Okay. So is $172,000 a full-time job?
The chair.
Sure is. What's that? Full-time job. So they work for the guy signing their check, which is the federal government. Your county commissioner, $17,000 a year. Is that going to put food on the table and a roof over their heads? Nope, sure isn't. So
Do they make more? The county commissioners?
30,000. Either way, it is not a full-time job, which means that they have to do what? They have to own a business or maintain a job. Where? Right here, right? So are they subject to economic factors? Are they tied to the success of the economy right here? Yep, they are. What about, where do they buy their gas? Right here. And their groceries? Right here. Their kids go to school? Right here. So does that mean they have to see you when they buy gas? Yep. They're subject to the same gas prices, and they have to look you in the eye. Grocery store, they have to look you in the eye. They go to their kid's football game, guess who they got to look in the eye? You. What about when the United States Congress or the U.S. Senate is in session, who's there? No one. Just them. What about county commissioner meetings? Who's there?
A lot of people in this room.
Yeah, a lot of people in this room. They have to look you in the eye from this far away. They have to walk right past you to get to their truck. They're going to have to give an account to you. If they make a bad vote, somebody's going to be like, what the heck are you doing that for? How dare you do that? Maybe true, but there is definitely more influence here than there is at the national level. There's definitely more influence here.
Okay, so we've talked about the why, we've talked about what it needs to be, we've talked about the purpose. So where's the how? How do we get this, like what's the reality of the militia becoming something that we can turn into a useful strong arm here in Cherokee County? Or, well, there's actually, I think about 7 counties represented in the room tonight.
So what we did in Virginia is we had a muster committee. That is what put that whole thing together, which was basically 6 or 8 guys that were motivated and recognized the importance of this and said, we need to have a public muster. And so they picked and so I believe that is the first step, is that there should be a muster committee. It should be a fairly small group. It should not be everyone in this room. It will take you 14 years to get something scheduled if everyone in this room is on the muster committee, I promise. I've watched it. It should be a group of 6 or 8 people, ideally people who are influential in their community. And their job is to identify a date, a time, and a location to have a public muster. Then go forth with advertising. Advertise it everywhere. I tell you what, the thing that was more successful for Campbell County and Bedford County than anything else was paper flyers. They put them up everywhere. Every bulletin board, every gas station, every other phone pole in the county had one of those stupid muster flyers on it. They were everywhere. Yeah, you'll get censored. You'll get censored. Well, no, if you're talking like local news outlets, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done interviews with all the local radio and TV stations and all that. That is successful. Well, I used to have a Facebook account and an Instagram account, and so did my wife, and so did Campbell County Militia, and they deleted all of it. I don't post anything. I do not post anything even remotely confrontational, but I'm the commander of the militia. So it's gone.
So when you put flyers everywhere, it's for people like to come to a meeting?
Public muster. Public muster.
Where's the paperwork
So-
floating around?
Public muster is just a gathering. It's a get-together or a meeting, and the idea is to get people to sign up to be part of it. Now, there are two other responsibilities that I would say fall to the muster committee and the people that they network with. One of those is to control optics. So we already talked about what everyone thinks of when I say the word militia, right? That is the dirty M word. I don't know how they spelled it with only 4 letters, but they did. It's a dirty word. It conjures ideas of all sorts of crazy, wild nonsense. So it's very important to control the optics, because if you do not very carefully control the optics, you're going to have a bunch of good old boys that are going to show up in camouflage from head to toe with body armor and rifles and box masks and so on and so forth. That is not, that's not what constitutional, well-regulated militia is. It's not necessary to the security of a free state. Those are not the finest and most upstanding members of your community. And it looks like garbage. It looks like a costume party. It is not the appropriate optic. So when I have been involved with this going forward beyond those first musters, I have leaned on muster committees to control that optic by prohibiting long guns, which helps control that. Usually guys will not show up in costume if they can't bring their gun too. So that nixes a lot of that. We control the optic as far as flags are concerned. I would recommend that you only authorize 2 flags. One of those is the U.S. national colors. The other is the state flag. Nothing else. Not because I have any issue with the Gadsden flag, not because I have any issue with the Appeal to Heaven flag or any of that, but if you don't very carefully control that optic, you're going to have dudes show up with the battle flag of Northern Virginia, you're going to have dudes show up with Punisher flags and Trump flags and, yep, all of the above, and that's not the appropriate optic. That makes it very, very easy. As far as the battle flag of Northern Virginia is concerned, the left has already won that fight. They own that. It's racist. Perception is reality. It's garbage. They rewrote history, but that's done. That ship has sailed. So when you show up with a Confederate battle flag, they've already written the narrative, and we just played right into their hand. So it's very, very important that optic is controlled. Also, I would control the optic as far as T-shirts are concerned. I would prohibit profanity, hate speech, stuff like that. Use the appropriate buzzwords. What's that? Yeah, all of the above. I would prohibit anything that can be construed negatively. This is also one of the reasons that it's important to do it in like a public park where it is a permitted event. Pull a permit for a permitted venue like a public park, because then when bad actors or antagonists show up, then you can just turn to law enforcement and say, hey, these guys are not part of our permitted event. And then law enforcement will make them disappear. So then you don't have to get into a January 6th scenario because you're permitted, and anyone that is not part of the idea that you're trying to promote, when someone is an agitator, if you go to them and say, hey, look, man, we're trying to control the optics, this is damaging the appropriate optic, have a conversation with the person. But if they're not willing to budge, hey, officer, please escort this person out. Yes, ma'am.
So that kind of just makes me ask, isn't it kind of like asking the government something that you shouldn't have to ask permission for by having to go and, ask for a permit? And what if they say no, then you don't? Like, that's not...
So, good question. I see where you're going with that. Good question. if a young man goes to a girl's father and he wants to marry her, is he asking the father's permission or is he asking his blessing? He's asking his blessing. If dad says no, is he going to go, well, your daddy said no, forget it? Not likely. Not likely. Are we asking government's permission or are we giving them an opportunity to have a seat at the table? We're giving them an opportunity to have the seat at the table. We are not asking their permission.
I will say, the people I talked to, just kind of give y'all some feedback as this was happening, there are several people that, like Frank Reynolds did want to be here, but it's their last night of the Citizens Academy. So it's the award night and all that stuff. And I'm not defending him, but I am saying he is interested in this. The man has literally looked up what is a militia district. He knows about this map. I told him, oh, no wonder I'm in the Wildwood, or what is it called? Wildcat militia district. It's one of the few precincts that was a militia district, and I'm right there. So he is interested because we're here to stand shoulder to shoulder with them, and they get that. Every officer, Holly Springs, Canton, Woodstock, every single police officer I've talked to on a city level can't wait for this to happen here. Because they are scared shitless at what's gonna happen when someone flicks that switch and everybody who jumped the border that they already know is here activates. So I'm just trying to piggyback you, or back up what you're saying, because I was afraid to talk about this, especially on social media. That's why we didn't share this on social.
Right.
But I'm not afraid because I can tell you, I get told all the time, thank you for doing this. There are people in law enforcement, first responders. I even had the Holly Springs City Council say, heck yeah, let's do it. They're excited. So because as long as we approach it the way Dan's talking about, we're not here to be the pitchforks.
Right.
I am going to get Frank Reynolds a little mini pitchfork because it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Asking their blessing, not asking their permission. That is the other job that the muster committee has, is to go to local law enforcement, to go to county commissioners, to go to boards of supervisors and city councilmen and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We want you to be involved with this. We want you to participate. We want you to have a seat at the table. Please participate in this. If they go, I don't want any part of that. Oh, well, so be it. You did your job. I believe in order for it to be called constitutional militia, I think that you have to be doggedly pursuing a relationship with local and state government. That doesn't mean that they will give you the recognition. That doesn't mean that your board is going to... So Campbell and Bedford County both, our board of supervisors passed resolutions that formally recognized Campbell and Bedford County militia as county assets. We're literally formally recognized by county government. Probably, yes. Yep. A whole bunch of whereas stuff in there written by lawyers. Yep, that's it. Do I expect that county boards are just going to full steam ahead and formally recognize right off the bat? No, I don't. It's going to take some time to build some rapport and to demonstrate the quality of character that is necessary to get that kind of recognition. But we should be doggedly pursuing it. There's some localities that those boards are just not ever going to do it. They're just a bunch of liberal nuts. Those counties outside of D.C., Fauquier and Prince William and all the Alexandria, all those counties up there, their boards are never going to formally recognize county militia. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's a God-given constitutionally protected right. So we're going to do it because that's part of our job as biblical men. Now, we're going to give government an opportunity to participate. By all means, give your county government an opportunity to take care, pick up the authority that was delegated to them and do their job. If your county government will say, yeah, you're absolutely right, we've been failing in our job, we need to get a roster. Let's work through the census and figure out how many men at arms we have, and let's appoint officers, and let's make this happen. By all means, they should be doing that. That's their job. But if they don't, it's our job. Incapable of annihilation. Yes, ma'am.
You talk about biblical men, but where do biblical women fit in your picture?
Well,
I asked the same question, Ken, so it was coming.
I think that biblical men's responsibility to lead. And so I think that it demonstrates a massive failure in our culture that we have so many women that have stepped up and led and continue to lead, which ultimately I recognize, or I consider to be a failure of the men to be the biblical men that they should be. Because I don't think that it's natural for women to want to step up and lead when there is a biblical man that is doing his job appropriately. But women are very good at recognizing the void or the absence of leadership, and when no one else is doing it, then the women will step up and do it. And ultimately, that's pushing you guys outside of a role where you really belong. I may ruffle some feathers with that. If feelings get hurt, oh well, that's my opinion. I think it is a cultural failure of the men. The same thing is true with women in the military. If the men in the military were everything that they should be, so my wife is one of the top soldiers in the Virginia Army National Guard. She is one of the top shooters in the entire nation. She is the 2007 collegiate pistol champion for the whole nation. She shot on the U.S. national shooting team. She now shoots on the international combat shooting team, literally wins international matches against foreign countries. She's either 3 or 4 times now has been either the soldier or non-commissioned officer of the year for whatever unit she belongs to. She's a badass, no doubt about it.
That's her in the blue dress.
Yes, that's her in the blue dress.
Like a badass.
She is. Alex cannot even begin to compete with me as a soldier. She is an absolutely tremendous marksman. She outshoots me, but I am a lot better soldier. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'm faster. My body is physiologically designed to do war. Women are not. If the men in the military were everything that they should be, there wouldn't be any women in combat arms. Because if we just applied the same standard across the board, absolutely positively, Alex can outperform a lot of the men in combat arms. She carries 5 MOSs, 3 of them are combat arms. She carries 11 Bravo, which is infantrymen. She carries 11 Charlie, which is mortarmen, and she carries 12 Bravo, which is combat engineer. And she can outperform most of the male soldiers in those MOSs. Military occupational specialty. It's like your job within the military.
So women fit in though, because we talked about that. So just because we're starting to approach the top of the hour, and I know that you could talk about this all day, and I could too. When I asked him that, you talked about different roles and different positions, and all this paperwork is here. And if you guys, for everybody who came in, just make sure before you walk out that door that your email is right, that you're registered. And you can go to the website and do that too. We will send you this paperwork, so you guys can do this, because Dan has given me permission to just, he wants this to happen all across the country.
Change
That's
the
why he
logo on
drove
it, make it
here.
yours.
But talk if you can, if you don't mind, for just the last 10 minutes here. Just what it looks like when you once you do a public muster and you have your committee.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Because I know that's in here, but what does that kind of look like? What kind of roles? Because you talked about, I love the way you broke down the different positions, if you will.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now. Okay, so, all right, so what we did is, for those of you with a military background, so all these states have paramilitary activities clauses in their law. And lots of people say, oh, well, it's a legal militia, it's in violation of paramilitary activity clauses. No, it is not. It is not for 2 different reasons. One is all of those paramilitary activities clauses say explicitly that you cannot train to arms for the purpose of inciting violence or causing civil unrest or basically committing crime, which obviously you guys have heard me basically talk about nothing other than government. I'm as law and order as they come. So it is not in violation of that. Additionally, this is not a paramilitary organization. This is a military organization. As per, in my case, Virginia Code Section 44-1, Georgia has a similar code section, but I'm not sure what it is offhand. As per U.S. Title 10, this is a military organization. So we structured ours like a military organization. So if you have a military background, what we did is, okay, so yeah, I've got 500 members, but I can't get 500 people to show up for anything. Most I can reliably get to show up to something at one time is about 100 people. So we said, okay, 100 people is a company-sized element, militarily speaking. So we built our command structure around a company-sized element. So if I were to wear rank, which I do not, I would be a company commander, I would wear captain's bars. And then we have all of that senior command structure. We have an executive officer, we have a first sergeant, and then you have fire teams and squads and platoons within the company. Additionally, we recognize that that system is good for guys like me that want to train tactically, that want to do the gunfighter stuff, that want all of that kind of training. That system works well. But it doesn't work well for most of our membership because most of our membership are not that. They're not young gunfighters. So we have, on the tactical side, we have teams and squads and fire teams and all that. The other side of the house, we have, what do we call them? Neighborhood sectors, which is just based on geographic location. So on a fire team, you might have guys from every different corner of wherever because those guys have the appropriate skill sets and work well together, so they're a fire team. But that doesn't apply to neighborhood sector. Neighborhood sector is whoever you have geographically co-located, so that when you have an emergency, you have already networked with and have immediate access to the people that are close to you. So that when a tree falls on your house and you need to get your wife out, you're not going to call some dude that lives 45 minutes away across the county. You need to access the people that live next door, that live 2 doors down. So that's where the community or neighborhood sectors come in. So if you're a gunfighter, you're on a fire team, you're in a squad, whatever, but you're also in a neighborhood sector. And that neighborhood sector also has a whole bunch of other people. Janet is 80 years old and she walks with my analogy of the 4'11" lady with the walker and the little crochet basket with a 38 in it, that's Janet. She's in a neighborhood sector with dudes that are strapping young gunfighters. And that's exactly the way that it's supposed to be because she has immediate access to them. And they have immediate access to her too. Because, even these young gunfighters are like, yeah, boy, I gotta start working on growing some of my own food. And I don't have any idea how to do that, but Janet does. Janet's really good at that. And so, yeah, Janet lives 2 doors down. Hey, Janet, I had a question about these tomatoes. Oh, I can come right over and take a look. So those neighborhood sectors are really, really important. So there's 2 different dynamics there. And, militia kind of acts like it's like an umbrella, like a clearinghouse, because everybody on the conservative side of things, they've all got their hot button issue, right? For me, it might be 2A. For somebody else, it might be medical freedom. It might be religious freedom. It might be 1A. It might be whatever. Everybody's got their hot button issue. But militia covers all of that. I have got people that are diehardly dedicated to prepping and sustainable living and stuff like that. I've got people that are diehardly committed to herbal medicine. I have people that are, paramedics and firefighters that are diehardly committed to the search and rescue and the search side of things. And I've got, obviously gunfighters. And I have people that their whole state of being is being involved in politics and in civic duty and all that. So I've got people from all these different things, but they all fall under that same umbrella of militia. So yeah, it's not just a 2A thing.
And then what's the admin side? Because that's where the women, I think, you said.
Yeah, so we took a company-sized element, but for companies do not operate independent from battalions because they don't have the ability to, because the battalions supply things like logistics. So what we did is we took a company-sized element in command structure, and then we attached battalion S shops to that company-sized element. So the S shops are S1, which is administration, and Abby, our administrative officer, she's the one that tracks all the paperwork and all that kind of stuff, manages incoming and outgoing emails and all of that. S2 is intelligence. Primarily what I use the intelligence officer for right now is vetting, which is if there's somebody that for whatever reason rubs me the wrong way, I'll say, hey, Brian, can you look into that dude and figure out who he is and who he knows, because that's my primary thing with vetting. Basically, anyone that gets involved in this is from the community in some fashion. Somebody knows them. Somebody knows them. My number one question whenever somebody new shows up at my meeting is, hey, how did you hear about us? Oh, well, I went to school with so-and-so, and I bumped into him at the gas station the other day, and he said I had to come check this out. Oh, okay, cool. I know that dude. He wouldn't have invited you if you weren't squared away. Oh, I work with Jenny down at the hospital. She's been hounding me for 3 years, and she wanted me to come out to one of these, and I finally got here. Okay, cool. I know, Jenny. You're good. So, I don't remember where I was going with that, but yeah, vetting. That's what I use for vetting. I don't run background checks. I don't do any of that. I just ask them who they know in the community, and their reputation precedes them. And that has worked extremely well. I did have one instance where somebody new showed up at a meeting, and by the time I got out of the meeting, I had 3 text messages from people saying, hey, do you know that guy? No. Maybe you should reach out to Bedford. I think they know him. So I reached out to Bedford County Militia, said, hey, do you know so-and-so? Oh, yeah. I'll have the intelligence officer send over a packet. Packet? Dude lied about his military service. No, I don't think it was Walls. I can't remember now, to be honest with you. But he told me that he was medically discharged. Ultimately, that was a lie. Bedford had a copy of his DD-214. He was in the military for 3 months. He never graduated basic training. And I also obtained the commander's memo that recommended for him for separation for multiple counts of sexual misconduct. I gave him every opportunity to come clean. I told him point blank, I have your DD-214. You need to be straight with me and tell me what you were separated for. Oh no, that thing is wrong. That's not actually what I was separated for. I have the memo from your commander that says what you were separated for. And so so ultimately I separated him because he wouldn't tell me the truth. If he had just come to me off the get-go and said, hey, look, I did some dumb things when I was younger. It was a long time ago. I'm a totally different person. I screwed up. It follows me everywhere I go. I would have gone, okay, we'll work through that. But when you lie to me and lie to me and lie to me and lie to me, sorry. That's why we have a code of conduct, is because we realized fairly early on, immediately after we formed the organization, we had a guy that showed up to the first muster. He bought a ball cap that said Campbell Militia on the front of it in huge letters, grabbed his really cool Palmetto State Armory AR, took an awesome selfie and put that as his profile picture on social media. I'm not knocking Palmetto State Armory, by the way. There's nothing wrong with their guns, but... like a week later, he made a whole bunch of racist remarks on social media and told some lady he was going to lay her down next to her buddy George Floyd. Yeah, you're an idiot. At the time, we were still kind of rule by committee because we hadn't had elections yet. So myself and another gentleman were kind of acting as co-commanders. And he called me. He's like, did you see this crap? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's really bad. We got to do something about that. He's like, I'm kicking him out right now. I was like, okay, you kick him out. So Wes called the dude and said, hey, you're no longer part of this organization. I called the sheriff's department and said, hey, this is what's going on. I don't know if you guys can do anything or not, but please look into it. They said, oh my goodness, yeah, that's not good at all. We'll see what we can do. We'll send an officer out there. So they called me back like 2 hours later. They said, hey, we did send an officer. They did make contact. You're right, there's not really anything that we can do at this point, but we really appreciate you bringing it to our attention. 2 weeks later, he got picked up on narcotics charges. Probably don't do dumb things. The conversation immediately after kicking him out was, wait a minute, if we're the whole body of the people, we can't just kick people out willy-nilly because they said something we don't like. In that instance, we were correct. But that's not a good precedent. So we said, well, what do we do to prevent bad actors from polluting the organization and destroying our reputation? Code of conduct. So there are only 2 documents that I require from people. One is a liability release, so they can't sue us, and the other is I have to have a signed code of conduct. That way I have a mechanism, and basically if you read through that, basically what it says is be a good person, be an upstanding citizen. It's that simple. It's written by lawyers, so it's long and wordy. But then I have a mechanism. If people don't conduct themselves in that fashion, then I can say, hey, you're in violation of, Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of our Code of Conduct, which you signed saying that you would not participate in this type of activity. I'm sorry, we're going to have to separate you from the organization. So that's what that's there for, is it helps protect the organization. Questions? Am I answering questions?
You said something about blanketing the city, with flyers and trying to get people in. I'm thinking that you could get a lot of bad actors that way.
the possibility definitely exists. So what she said is talking about posting flyers up everywhere, and you could get whoever to show up. Yeah, that dude that showed up, and I wish I could remember his name because his name was kind of funny besides. But yeah, that dude just came to a public muster because he saw a flyer somewhere. That's how the code of conduct, and you will figure out very quickly, because you show up to muster and you look around and you're like, geez, I know a lot of these people. And usually the people that you don't know, somebody that you do know and trust knows that person. And yeah, you do have a code of conduct, so there is protection there that way. But yes, that possibility definitely exists. I think it goes back to leadership. And the other question I get, which is kind of along those same lines, is, well, what about January 6th? What about bad actors that are federal plants or are, hired informants or whatever? What do you do to protect against that? Leadership is what protects against that. I don't care who you are. You cannot show up and steer my ship. You're not steering this ship. You can't show up to my meeting and suggest anything that's illegal, immoral, or unethical and expect me to put up with it, because I won't. The force of character of the person steering the ship, or the people steering the ship, that command staff, is what protects from bad actors. Yes, ma'am.
This isn't a question, it's kind of a comment on what you're saying. But to me, one of the things is people get an idea and they run out without thoroughly getting everything set up first. And flyers, in particular, for example, you've got to do a really good job of wordsmithing those flyers to draw the people you want and to discourage the people you don't. And those kinds of things make a big difference in anything you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's unequivocally true. That's part of the reason for the controlling the optic. So when we advertise with flyers, we put on the flyer no long guns, no flags with the exception of Virginia and national colors, stuff like that, because that immediately discourages some of those bad actors that just want to do stupid things. Some of those people are immediately discouraged by that.
Is that what this is? Is your muster call?
Yeah, so that is the one that, somebody used that. I've got a whole bunch of other flyers. And like the imagery that you use on flyers and stuff like that is very important. Definitely do not use imagery from like the knuckleheads in Michigan. Like that is not the optic that you're looking for. I like stuff that is got like historical relevance. And I've got on my phone like a muster call from like the 1700s. Which is super interesting, and it's funny because they use letters differently. So instead of S's, they use F's and stuff like that. So it's a little bit hard to read sometimes. But yeah, anything like that ties to the historical relevance. Sometimes when I do these lectures, I wear my colonial officer's uniform because I think that sends the right message that what we're doing is 1770s militia, not 1998 militia, because there's a big difference.
Who was the first person you went to in your county? Was it the sheriff? Was it their commissioners? Who was it?
So it was Board of Supervisors, but one of the board members was involved with the muster committee.
Okay.
Is board
So-
of supervisors like our commissioners?
That's your county commissioners. Yep, County Board of Supervisors, the same thing as your commissioners.
And one is very interested, but one of our reps did a town hall, Weatherby.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's at a town hall tonight, so I didn't get a chance to talk to Steve West.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And I would do the same thing with board members that you do with sheriff, that you do with other law enforcement officers. Hey, we wanted you to be on the ground floor. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. We really want you to be involved and have a voice in this process. If you would come here. And honestly, when it comes to promoting it, there is nothing that's going to promote it faster than board members and sheriffs going, yeah, we're about this. We're on board.
You gotta have it.
Yes, ma'am.
What if they're actually the opposite,
Actively working against you?
actively working against your community, in which they are in the county that we are in? So how do you work against that, or how do you go?
Full steam ahead.
You're not asking for permission.
You had your opportunity. Full steam
I've
ahead.
been asking for permission
yeah.
for too many years, I'm done. Kiss my ass.
We wanted you to know this is what we are doing. This is when it will be. This is where it's going to be. This is what we have done to control the optic. We would love to have you on board and participating if you're willing. And if he says I'm not willing, okay, thank you and have a nice day. I appreciate your time.
But you still would ask them. even
Yes.
though you know
Absolutely.
their character?
Absolutely and unequivocally, yes. Yep.
'Cause we're biblical people, not just
You know,
pitchforks.
I know I'm over time here. Let me tell a quick story. So I listened to a seminar a number of years ago. It was a historical account of Lexington and Concord, what actually happened on that day, very, very detailed historical account. And the guy teaching the lecture was talking about as the British column was retrograding back to Boston after Concord. And they were being bird-dogged and harassed by Continental militia, by colonial militia, but they weren't firing at them. And in order to appreciate the story, there were two things that you needed to understand about colonial and about military culture. So in colonial militia, if you violated the order of a militia officer or commander, you faced a firing squad or a noose. It was a death sentence. The other thing that you needed to understand is these men did not know each other. In Lexington and Concord, they came from an enormous geographic area, relatively speaking to the time, and men did not travel the way that we travel today. They didn't have time, they didn't have the means. So these men did not know each other. Commanders possibly, the men did not. So as the column is retrograding back to Boston, they encounter a bridge, and the bridge is far too narrow for the whole column, so the whole thing bottlenecks. And there's one militia company that's in the road that is marching behind the British column to make sure that they keep moving and they don't stop. And when the column stops, the company in the road does not. They continue to march, so they're getting closer and closer and closer. And the British decide, we're going to give them a volley and back them off. We're not going to let them walk up on us. So they form a firing line on the road. And when they do that, one of the officers that's watching from the wood line says, now wait a minute. Now, everybody knows the order of the day, right? It was issued by John Parker at Punkatasset Hill. Stand your ground, do not fire unless fired upon. But if they mean to have a war, let it be here or let it be today. So that's the order that they're operating under. Stand your ground, do not fire unless fired upon. So the officer is watching what's transpiring on the road in front of him and realizes, wait a minute, in order for me to adhere to the order, I'm going to have to watch the company in the road take a volley at point blank. They're going to get slaughtered. Doesn't know the men, but can't watch that happen. So he gives the order, load and make ready, open fire. And they cut down that rear guard detachment in the road. There were no Americans that were killed right there. The guy teaching the lecture stops. He says, you know, you hear all the time, people are talking about that lone shot at Lexington Green. No one knows where the shot came from. That's the shot heard around the world. That's the moment that America was born. He said, I disagree. He said, this is the moment that America was born. The moment that a man decided that he would lay down his life for the liberty of someone he doesn't even know. He said, that's the moment that America was born. What other nation in the history of the world has sent their young men by the hundreds of thousands to die and soak someone else's dirt in our blood to purchase someone else's liberty? None. It never happened in the history of the world. Not to conquer, not to build an empire, not to rule other nations. To literally buy the liberty of other people in blood. Americans have no concept of that. You know who does have a concept of that? The French people in Normandy. I'm a non-commissioned officer with the Virginia Army National Guard. I came from active duty. I spent time in the Special Forces Qualification Course in the 82nd Airborne Division. Last year as a non-commissioned officer, I decided to participate in the competitions that the National Guard sponsors for Soldier and Non-Commissioned Officer of the Year. I did very, very well. I won the competition for the state of Virginia. I won the competition for Region 2, and they sent me to Nationals Alaska. I placed number 3 in the nation for non-commissioned officers. Because of that, I had an opportunity to go to Normandy and represent the United States of America for D-Day 79. There is no higher honor that a uniformed service member can have than to, at 0630, which was H hour, on the 6th of June, to stand on the beaches of Normandy holding the national colors. Wow. There is no higher honor, I promise you. I was absolutely floored. I came from division. I came from the 82nd. The 82nd takes a huge contingent to Normandy, so I had talked to guys that have been over there before, and they all told me this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. If you ever have the opportunity, you have to go. So I knew that it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I was absolutely floored. There are people that they see you in uniform, and they come up and get down on their knees and kiss your hands. because they understand the price that was paid. Americans have no concept of what it costs. They have no concept. Everywhere that you go in Normandy, there are two things that stand out. One is every place that the French national colors appear, the U.S. national colors appear also. Every flagpole, in front of every post office, every government building, every monument, everything has two flags. It has the French flag and it has the U.S. national colors. And the other thing that you recognize is that half of those buildings were built in like the 1300s. Literally half of the building, and the other half was built in the 1940s or 50s. Because everywhere that you go, there is stuff that was destroyed by the war. There are still tanks sitting parked in barns in Normandy. For Americans, D-Day is just something that happened a long time ago in a place far away. That's all it is. There's no appreciation in America for what was done there. There is a U.S. National Cemetery in Normandy that has, there are, I believe, 8,500-ish headstones, and then there's an additional wall that has 1,400 names on it of those whose remains were never recovered. I've been to Arlington. There is no comparison. The U.S. National Cemetery in Normandy puts Arlington to shame. Do you know who maintains this National Cemetery in Normandy? The French do. There is a waiting list to adopt a headstone. Those headstones are maintained by people in Normandy. There is a waiting list to adopt a U.S. headstone, to maintain it. And they are perfect. They're all white crosses or white stars of David. There is not a weed whacker mark around the bottom of any of those headstones. They are perfect. Every blade of grass, every piece of mulch, every bush, every shrub, everything on the entire property is perfect. You won't find that here. There's another cemetery just like that in Belgium. The waiting list to adopt a headstone for the cemetery in Belgium is like 4 years. These people understand something that we do not. You know, when I first got there, I expect, you know, we had like 27 ceremonies in 10 days or something like that. And I expected those ceremonies to be very, very somber. You know, we're commemorating a massive loss of life, right? And the ceremonies themselves were. But as soon as the ceremony was over, the French people are dragging you back to the town hall. They've got it decorated. They've got a DJ. They've got smoke machines and disco lights and food and open tap and the whole 9 yards. And it's a huge party. They want to just drink and party and dance the night away with the soldiers. And I didn't get it. I was like, what the heck is going on here? Like, they just assume that this is what Americans do? We just, like, I don't understand this. Well, after like the third one of those, I got lucky enough to, and it's kind of weird because, so all of those, they seat you like soldier, Frenchman, like every other one. And they don't speak any English, and I don't speak any French. So we go, and they do that back, and that's the extent of our interaction. Like the third one of those that we went to, I got lucky enough to be sitting like catty corner across from a dude that was born and raised in Texas and has lived in France for like the past 15 years. So I could actually communicate with him. And I asked him, I was like, hey man, I don't understand this. I don't get it. Like, what is going on here? These people they just assume that this is what Americans do, is they just want to dance and party and whatever. And he goes, oh, no. He says, no, you don't understand. He said, look, okay, here's how you need to look at this. This is what you need to understand. He said, in America, we have 4 July 1776. It's Independence Day. He said, in Normandy, they have 6 June 1944. He said, you have to understand that these people were ruled by the most evil regime on the face of the earth, at least in our time, for years. There is liberty in Normandy today because American soldiers bought it and paid for it. Yeah, there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 casualties, give or take, associated with the storming of the beach in Normandy. The liberation of France took 3 months. America's paid for it with 134,000 lives. in 3 months. We have no concept of that. We have no concept. 250,000 allies died to liberate France in that 3 months. And the Germans paid for their retreat across France with 400,000 lives. There were over 11,000 French civilians that were killed as collateral damage. Is anybody familiar with St. Lo, city of St. Lo in Normandy, or the story of St. Lo, the Lost Battalion? There was an American battalion that advanced ahead of other units, ended up cut off. If you've ever seen the picture of the demolished chapel with the body of the American soldier draped in the flag on the pile of rubble, that was the commander that retrieved the Lost Battalion. He was killed in that action, and they put his body on the hood of the Jeep that was the first truck to enter the city of St. Lo, so that he was the first American. And once they entered the city, they took the body off, they put it on the steps of the chapel, which is nothing but rubble. And that became one of the very, very famous photos from the liberation of France. And the city of St. Lo is the place that Germany was trying to use as their breakout point. After we had established the beachhead and pushed inland, the Germans recognized if we don't stop them, this is over. And so they were using St. Lo as their point that they were going to try to punch through the Allied lines and push us back. And they were reinforcing it with armor. Well, the Allies recognized what the Germans were doing, and so they launched a massive bombing campaign against the city of St. Lo. The city of St. Lo is also called the capital of ruins. We destroyed 95% of the city. Google pictures of St. Lo. There is nothing left. We bombed it into oblivion, and we killed 3,000 French civilians in the process. Not the Germans killed. Allied bombers killed 3,000 French civilians. We did not have a ceremony at St. Lo because we were there for D-Day. St. Lo is inland. But the Lost Battalion was the 29th Infantry Division. I was there with the 29th Infantry Division. And so a bunch of their guys wanted to go to St. Lo. So 6 or 8 of us piled into a van. We went to St. Lo so we could see the city. There's a 13th century fortress on top of the, like where the cathedral is. And so, we saw all of that, and then we decided to go out to dinner. Now, we know that like American currency is pretty valuable over there. So any opportunity we get to support like the local economy, we do that. We eat out every chance we get. We tip really well. So we go out to dinner in St. Lo, like adjacent to where the chapel, like we could see the cathedral out the window of the restaurant. And I don't remember how many of us there was, maybe like 6 of us. We ran up like a $340 bill. We bought steak and lobster and alcohol and, the whole 9 yards. And the restaurant refused to allow us to pay. We went back and forth with them. Finally, we collected, and I think we sent a guy down the street to an ATM, and we came up with a pile of cash and left cash on the table and exited stage right.
Because you wouldn't have ordered all that.
The owner of the restaurant chased us down on the street, did not let us leave, and then told us, he's like, don't you dare do this. Don't take this from us. This is our opportunity to pay back. You take the money back.
Wow.
We said, okay, we'll take the money back. That's a city that the Allies destroyed. We killed 3,000 French civilians, and they won't let us pay for our food. The understanding that the people in that part of the world have, we just have no concept of it. Just none whatsoever. We were entrusted with the finest republic that has ever existed in the history of the world. What does the Bible tell us about that which we are entrusted with? To be a good steward of that which we are entrusted with, right? We always apply that to money, sometimes children, resources, property, cars, whatever. What about this republic? We were entrusted with it. We should be a good steward of it, right? So will I do absolutely everything in my power and some things that are not to preserve and protect this? Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Does that mean that I know that God is going to save America?
Yes. I do.
I don't.
I do.
I don't know that he's going to save America. But does that matter? No, it does not. If there is an army of 1,000 that intend to harm the weak and the innocent, and there is nothing in the way but me, can I run from the mob? Yep, they won't catch me. But can I? Heck no. I have a moral obligation as a biblical man. I know what the outcome is. I know they're going to kill me. They're still going to do whatever they intend to do. It does not matter. Someday, I am going to stand before the throne of the Almighty, and I am going to give an account for everything that I do and everything that I don't do. I will not stand before my God and tell him that I failed in my responsibility. You know, John Adams, in a series of letters to Abigail after the war, and they're addressed to Abigail, but he's talking to his children as well. One of those letters, he says, "Posterity, you will never know what it has cost my generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you make good use of it. If you do not, I will repent in heaven that I ever took half the pains to preserve it. I will be damned if it is me and my generation that causes the sacrifice of men like John Adams to be worthless. John Adams will not repent in heaven on account of me, because I have a moral obligation to preserve and protect what he entrusted to me. The only way for me to preserve and protect what he entrusted to me is through force of arms. That is the power that God has given us immediate access to. I can't stand on the tracks and pray that he stops the train. I cannot pray that he sends some other man to save America. He gave me every tool that I need to preserve and protect this republic. He put it all at my fingertips. He wrote it in stone in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. He gave us the model.
We stand with you.
I'm way over time now.
I have to cut you off because they're in my cover, but thank you so much, Dan. Was he not amazing?
I wanted to show you the back of my shirt.